Hey, Onslaught here with another tutorial, this time on Reaver Tuner Statistics Server, or RTSS for short. Some of you may have some experience with this already, as it does come with MSI Afterburner, so some of you may be familiar with that. You do not actually have to run this in conjunction with MSI Afterburner at all. If you have no use for MSI Afterburner's other features, you can run this to standalone to get the FPS limiter and the overlay. As per my other tutorial, I'm going to try and be as comprehensive as possible and try and cover everything. So there will be timestamps in the description, and as a part of the actual video, if you look in the time bar below, to skip forward to the bit that you might actually be interested in, because I said we're getting quite detailed in this, so they're going to be quite long. And I'm going to split this into two parts. So part one's going to be on the FPS limiting side of things, covering the FPS limiter itself, the settings to do with that, what you want to set your FPS limiter to depending on your use case for limiting the FPS. And in part two, we're going to be covering the actual overlay and how to set that up, and how to get all the different sensors and everything going. So to get started anyway, you're going to actually need the software. So the link will be in the description. But you want to download it actually off Guru 3D website here. This is a legit one. I do believe there are a few non-legitimate versions going around, like spoofs or whatever. So, as it says here. Anyway, so you're going to click on this one to download, or you can click there if you get impatient with it or it's not working. Save this. So I have uninstalled everything. Actually, I don't really run RTSS on this machine anyway, because I don't play games on this one. But yeah, so this is all fresh, so I can take you through it step by step. So you want to extract this. You can use 7-zip. It doesn't really matter. It's going to take 2 seconds regardless of which you use. Everything's just on the other screen, so I have to keep dragging it across anyway. So yeah, obviously you're going to select your language here, pretty self-explanatory. Oh my goodness. Right. Sorry, everything's just going on the wrong screen. Alright, so you're going to hit next here, except there's nothing dodgy in here. It's not going to install any other software, so you don't need to be too concerned about that. If you don't want shortcuts, you can tick that box. It's just a usual install process, nothing special here. Wait for it to finish. No, I don't really care to view the README. Alright, so once you actually have it installed anyway, and you open up the program, this is the screen you're going to get here. So I'm just going to start sort of from top to bottom kind of thing. So start with Windows if you want this to automatically start up, which if you're going to be using this on your, it's a main gaming PC, it's probably easier just to have this start with Windows, so then you don't have to remember to open it up. Application detection level and stealth mode. This is to do with like anti-cheat systems and stuff, or certain games not allowing the overlay to show up and the frame rate limiter to work properly. So depending on your particular game, you may have to mess with this. I can't really give you specific settings for every single game that exists, but I will say that the default settings do work, and you're probably better off just sticking that to on. And I've never really had an issue, apart from maybe one game that I can think of, which is Destiny 2. But yeah, anyway, this here is in relation to which profile you're using. So obviously the global profile will apply to anything that doesn't have a specific profile set to it. So you can put in a limit here. So say you want 100 FPS. You can mess around with scanline sync as well if you have tearing issues on your monitor, which I'll get into a little bit more later. But for the most part, I haven't found that to be overly useful, to be honest with you. So I would probably just skip on the scanline sync. As for profiles anyway, so I sort of said I was going to try and go from top to bottom, but it's going to jump around a little bit. So we can add So I've already got here the Heaven benchmark because we're just going to use that as our quote-unquote game to test this with. So when we set this one here, we can actually set a different FPS limit for this game, which you might want to do, on a more demanding game where your 1% lows might not be as high, or, maybe you play a competitive game or something, you want a higher overall frame rate for that one, if you can run it. That might be a reason why you want to set different profiles for different games. And also this here, you can set these settings depending on the game that you are in fact playing. On-screen display shadow, that's just a visual effect, so it just has like a bit of a black shadow around the numbers. It makes it a bit easier to read, I find, so you probably just leave it to on. On-screen display fill, this is all to do with the on-screen display, but I'm just going to cover it very quickly now. That just basically puts this shadow kind of around it, which I personally am not a fan of, but I leave it off. Some people might like that one. And the zoom, I usually just minimize that out, but this is really depending on what resolution you're running, and maybe depending on your screen size or how good your eyesight is, you might need to bump this up. Here, obviously, you can adjust the position of it, but the top left I usually find works best for me. And once again, you can set this on a per game basis. So maybe there's something here that's, critical information to your game, and maybe you want to put it here or here. So you could do that. I'm gonna cover more about the customization of this later. So for now, we'll just go ahead and we'll get into the setup here. So in general here, start minimize, this just means if you're going to start at Windows or when you open the program, it will start in your taskbar here. It won't be opened up like that. And that's usually, it's the default setting. These are all the defaults, by the way. And that would be how I would run it anyway. This here is like the polling rate. I would suggest just leaving most of this at default. You can, if you want it to be more accurate, you can reduce these, but obviously the more times you poll the sensors and stuff, you're going to, it's going to incur like a higher CPU usage as a result of that. So I would say that the default settings are fine. I don't notice any performance drop from running this. So yeah, all of this here, this is just to do with how it calculates frame time and frame rate. You can have instantaneous or average, and then it's the displayed one's going to be averaged over this interval here. Considering you're polling every 500 milliseconds, obviously it's only an average of these two anyway, so it's almost instantaneous anyway, but you could set it to that if you want to. And as for this, I've never actually played with that. I'll just leave that, and same with this as well. I've just left those two as default. Check for updates. It's pretty self-explanatory, really. If you don't want it to annoy you about updates, just hit that one, and then it will stop bugging you, because sometimes when it opens with Windows, it will pop up with an annoying screen telling you that there's a new update available, and if you want to download it. And realistically, unless there's some major new feature that come out, which there usually isn't, there's probably no real actual need to update this. In here, we want to do this. Tick this one if you want to be able to see your 1% lows and 0.1% lows and average frame rate, etc. You'll need to have this ticked or it won't work. This here is the actual frame rate limiter settings that do make a bit of a difference. So you've got 4 settings here. This one isn't really a setting to do with RTSS as such. This basically passes it on to the NVIDIA frame rate, the NVIDIA frame rate limiter. So it's not the RTSS's frame rate limiter, but it will overwrite the settings with the settings you put here, but it uses NVIDIA's frame rate limiter essentially. So it's really these 3 that are actually to do with this software. So you might be wondering, okay, what do these three do then? So async is going to give you the best frame timing and the best latency overall. It is a performance orientated setting. Then you've got front edge sync and back edge sync, and basically a front edge sync is going to allow a little bit of wiggle room so that the frames will sync to the frame presentation timing, and back edge sync is the same thing, but it will be to the start of a new frame. So front edge sync, I would only use this in the worst case scenario if you have the laggiest of monitors. Back edge sync can help over async if you're having some tearing issues. But for the most part, I would just be using async because I find that I can usually get rid of the tearing on pretty much most, even like when I'm playing on TVs, my projector, all my gaming rigs and stuff. I've never had an issue really getting the tearing to go away with just async. But you never know because different setups, you know. So you may want to experiment with these if that's the reason why you are frame rate limiting. Which I guess brings me on to the next point of reasons why you may want to limit your frame rate. And I would say the number one reason I'm going to suggest is that you want to actually limit it to your 1% lows, because that's what's going to give you the smoothest overall experience. There's no point if, say, your average frame rate is, or your peaks are at like 300 FPS, but you have massive swings that bring it down to even 170, which is still a high frame rate. But if your frame rate is constantly swinging between 170 and 300, your frame timing is going to be all over the place, and it's going to end up feeling worse than just a smooth, say, 160. Maybe not the best example. Maybe change those numbers around and maybe make it like 120 and 90 or something like that, because 160 frames per second is always going to feel pretty smooth, you know? But anyway, so measuring your 1% lows, this is a little bit to do with the overlay, but I'm just going to cover it very briefly here because it's relevant to the tutorial at hand. So, sorry, you want to go into setup, and then when you hit plugins here, there's a few you're going to do. So you're going to enable both of these. And in Hotkey Handler, we're going to set a hotkey to toggle the on-screen display. So I usually use Control F9, and I usually use Control F10 to toggle the frame rate limiter on and off. And then here under benchmark, you're going to want to set a hotkey for this too. So depends what you want to use here. It doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to set an end recording unless you actually want to look at this file here. And you want to record between a certain time and end at a certain time. The reason why you have to set this, I'll get into, and you'll see later in the tutorial why you have to do this. But yeah, for now, just set a hotkey for this one and an end recording if you want. And then yes, you can look in this text file that it generates here, and it will spit out a text document for you. Alright, so while editing this, I noticed that I'd left out a whole segment about the Hotkey Handler profiles here. So under the Hotkey Handler properties, you've got these programmable profile modifiers here. And obviously you can set, you know, whatever, you know, shortcuts you want here for it. Something preferably that you're not going to hit in a game normally, so it doesn't mess around with it. You know, something out of the way. Like, for example, this is something you could probably use. I don't think most programs and games aren't going to use this. Anyway, under here, what you can do is you can change on the fly your FPS limit. If you go to, so for the first one, I'll probably do a set. So here you can see target profile is going to be global. Obviously, you can change this to whatever other profile you've got if you want it to be a different one. Target profile property is going to be the frame rate limit. That's just the attribute that you're adjusting. The modifier type, so you've got set, add, or exclusive or. I'm not going to cover this one in this tutorial. This is, I don't even know why you'd want to use this. But anyway, so for the first one, you might want to set like a 60, or maybe you've got like an AFK setting where, you know, for power saving maybe, something like that. Obviously, you can change the description to be accurate to what it actually is doing if you want to. For the next one, you can do something like decrease frame rate limit. So this is to do with being able to adjust it on the fly, obviously. Under add, you notice it just puts a negative here, and when you have it on increase, it just takes away that. So, because obviously you don't have a subtract option, but you can just type the plus there. You don't actually have to. These are just presets that automatically fill this out for you. It doesn't actually matter as such whether you use it or not. But anyway, when you put -10 here, what this is going to do is it's going to take 10% up, not 10%, sorry, 10 off of your frame rate limit. So you can click OK here. And for the same here, we can go increase and 10. So you can obviously adjust this to whatever stepping you want it to be. If you want it to be in 2s or 5s or 10s, just for the purposes, we'll go like that. And then maybe you want one that's just your monitor refresh rate or something like that. So we'll go set first. So we'll say 144. A lot of people have 144 Hertz monitors. And that way you've got something to fall back on if you load up your game or whatever and you find, oh, my FPS limit is set to like something funky from a different game or something. You've at least got something you can quickly hit, and then you've got a default option. Obviously going to the monitor's refresh rate is a pretty safe choice most of the time, as I'll cover later in this. So anyway, now that you've done that, you want to head over into the overlay editor and set this. Alright, so now that you're in the overlay editor, you're just going to want to go to tables, hit edit. We'll remove that one. I already have one already preset up. I did uninstall it, but anyway, you're going to hit add here, and we can call this one frame rates, for example. And I'll get more into the setup of this in part 2 to this tutorial, but for now, we're just going to click on frame rate, click OK. I want to name this FPS, and then click add cells to new line, and then say go the 1% lows if you want to view these. We'll go 1% low, and hit OK again, add a layer. Make this a bit bigger maybe, and in here get rid of this, so because we don't want it to say text layer, we want it to actually have the information. So we're going to hit add, and we're going to add that text table, and then here's the one that we just created called frame rates. We're going to hit OK on that, and it's automatically going to give us this piece of code, if you want to call it that. And then, you've got your little display here. So then you can now save this as your default. So you can have more than one overlay. Once again, I'm going to get into that later. But once you've done all that, hit OK. And now I'm just going to fire up, Heaven Benchmark as our quote-unquote game. Yeah, so here you can see here's Heaven, and now see, I'll just make this bigger for the sake of the video. Oh, that's very big, doesn't matter, you can see it. Now this is why I said that you want to do this, add a begin recording hotkey here, because you see, because Heaven Benchmark started at 0 frames per second, or the 1% low is, well, 0 frames per second. So we want to, if I hit my hotkey for it, there. And this is probably, yes, it'll drop between, different scenes because Heaven Benchmark things. But this number here that it spits out is a good one to use for your actual frame rate limit. Obviously, it is set to 80. We've got it capped. As you can see here, the global is 100, so you can see our Heaven Benchmark variance. So if we set this then to say like 144 or something, we get that. And yeah, we had that bit of a hitch there. So there's a 1% low. Goes down, and then if you want to reset that, because sometimes in certain games during a loading screen or something, you might get like a false reading there. So like there you go, maybe you want to lock the FPS to something like this. That makes sense. We haven't got a very strong GPU in this machine, by the way. So if you're wondering why it's a little bit suffering. That's why. So yeah, that's a good one to definitely clamp your frame rate down to for the smoothest gameplay at the highest frame rate. And the other reason that you might want to clamp it is for obviously for power saving as well. So in terms of general recommendation on that, it's really going to depend on the game. If it's not a very fast-paced game or something, it's more of a slower pace, like not even an RTSS, like maybe like a turn-based sort of game or something. Maybe just clamp that to 60 or whatever feels smooth to you. Or you can always pull up the statistics of your GPU and see how much watts it's pulling and go based on that. And the other reason, obviously, is to stop screen tearing as well. So for a lot of games, just clamping to your monitor's refresh rate isn't a bad idea. In most cases, obviously there's going to be outliers there. Like, maybe you're trying to run one of the new AAA titles and you have a 540 hertz monitor or something ridiculous like that. Obviously achieving that kind of frame rate in a AAA title is, likely not going to happen, let's be honest. So, once again, clamping to the 1% lows is an option, or you can just clamp to the refresh of your monitor as another option. But yeah, I think that just about covers FPS limiting. It's just I see a lot of people not doing this, and then their gameplay is choppy despite having a high frame rate. And they can't quite figure out why that is, but basically it's all to do with frame timing. If you have your frame timings uneven, so what I mean by this is, say you're at 100 frames per second. That means that every 1/100th of a second, another frame would come out. If you have perfectly evened timings, but that's not to say that you might get 4 or 5, 7, whatever, throw in an arbitrary number here of frames that, come out really quickly, and then maybe the next, fewer, got a bit of more delay, it took a bit longer for it to calculate it, and then the next come out fast, it's going to cause that slight hitching and stuttering that just doesn't feel good, despite the actual frame rate being high. And I guess the other thing is obviously the actual FPS just taking big wild swings is also going to cause, well, once again, that's still a frame timing issue. You want your frame times to be even, basically, to get a smooth experience. And in doing so, obviously you'll put less stress on your hardware as well by not, like when you look up at a sky or something like that, and frame rate just goes through the roof, and your GPU's sitting at 100% utilization, things like that. You're putting out, using more power, more heat, more stress on your components, and usually it's not actually resulting in any smoother gameplay. So yeah, that's my take on that one. Stay tuned for part 2, which is going to be a much longer tutorial, because we're going to cover the RTSS overlay.